My name's John Paris. We appreciate you taking time out of your campaign schedule to join us this afternoon. Normally we introduce the Asian American group to all of the individuals we're interviewing. However, as we know, you are well acquainted with the group as a whole and certain members of this endorsement committee as well. First question that we're generally asking people is this: why have you decided to run for this particular race at this particular time?
For me, I had started not necessarily a career, but more of a journey in the grassroots aspect of life, in trying to get things changed in, areas of town where people didn't have many resources. So going down that journey, after a few years, I noticed that if I was going to affect, I can affect how people think and how people act. I can help them, but what I couldn't do, there was tons of barriers that we've experienced in that, on that journey, that can only be done on a legislative level. So for me, this is more of a graduation.
We did some research on you prior to the interviews today, and we see that you've done a significant amount of work for with underprivileged children and with underprivileged schools here, not only within your district but within Las Vegas as a whole. What ideas do you have, if elected, to start working towards changing the educational difficulties that a lot of our students are having today?
Well, my business, I'm in the mental health business, the behavioral health to be exact, and I can tell you one of the largest problems that schools face is behavior. Kids come, even lack of nutrition causes behavioral problems. So for me, I think dealing with the root of why kids are doing the things they are doing is a huge thing that Nevada has to look at. I went to school, actually. I graduated in California, but I went to Rancho High School and I went to J.D. Smith. So, almost two decades ago, I sat in these classrooms in the city. I graduated high school, 3.55 grade point average. A lot of my friends went from J.D. Smith Junior High School to Rancho with me, and 4 D's and 2 F's, and they graduated. The problem that I think that we have in Las Vegas is that education is not taken very seriously. I have these discussions with friends and people all the time on how do you put value into education when, as almost like a city or almost as a culture or even a subculture, we don't value education. So I can't necessarily say from a legislative standpoint I have all the right answers for that, but I can tell you that being involved with kids and parents, that giving parents resources, and I don't necessarily mean the government paying for things, but giving parents resources to mental health facilities, to things that will help their children be able to sit down and learn. I think that's something that has not been talked about. Something kind of on that same level is when you look at all these things that have happened with people shooting up schools. One of the biggest consensus of all these people is the fact that they have mental health issues, and no one wants to dive into that. So education is in Las Vegas. Yes, it's been not that great for the last 2 decades, but I can tell you it's not just the education piece. That's the education suffering because there are absent fathers. There's 2 parents are working. There's just a lot of things, and I think as a community, those are the things in the areas that we need to step up, legislatively and non-legislatively. I'm just meaning as community members, we need to take a look at that.
Max, I'm very passionate about education. If you were to be elected as assemblyman, will you vouch to reform or starting up some kind of moral, ethic, education classes for the young, preschool or grade school. And I believe that's where the problem lies. It's much easier to teach the young. If you have a kid in the classroom just causing all kinds of scene, all the rest of the kids are distracted. And because of the parents, they are all working, try to survive. And I've noticed that there is no such education in the school system. By way of that is because one day my kid come back, I've been telling my 7-year-old son forever, put on your seatbelt, buckle up. Every single time he fell, every single time. But one day he come back, my teacher says, blah, 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 blah. And it's a law. And they take it so seriously from a teacher.
Right.
And that way they all learn how to respect while they're young. If otherwise, just like last candidate I asked them, every one of them say we need money, we need this and that. But it's a basic fundamental issue. School, parents, they all have to conform somewhere that this is being taught in school. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, yes, I do. I could tell you just once again through experience, and experience as a parent of quite a few children, and a participant in the school system here in Las Vegas. I remember when I was a kid, truancies. How do you stop kids from being truant? You fine their parents $500 every time they're truant, and that will be a great starting point. And honestly, those things have been a part of our school system for years, but the problem is nothing's enforced. So what good is the law if it's not enforced? Once again, dealing with children, all that is issues going back to the family unit. Once again, I'm absolutely for preserving classrooms. I don't think that we should be tearing classrooms apart, but I can tell you it is very, very, very difficult for teachers to curb behavior and teach at the same time. They are not equipped to do that. I know teachers that come from New York, they come to Las Vegas, and you would think, well, they're from New York, they would have a good good handle on hard kids. And yeah, but the kids out there aren't doing cocaine. The kids out there aren't meth addicts. So I mean, Vegas has a very, very different dynamic. And once again, I don't know to what level we can educate or pass legislation that will reform that part of our school systems. I can tell you that if anyone has any good idea, you as a concerned citizen, me as a concerned citizen, wanted to get together and draft something up, I would be more than willing to do that.
Good.
As you know, there are certain members of our endorsement committee who are involved in their professional life, involved with group homes, primarily for the elderly. And every so often there are pieces of legislation that go up and bills become introduced, and there's language in there that appears to be innocuous yet significantly impacts the administration of those group homes. What assurances can you give that if you are elected, that should situations like that arise, that you'll have an open door policy and allow your constituents and other concerned Nevadans to contact you in order to discuss their views and how certain, even again, what appears to be an otherwise innocent sentence can certainly impact the lives of numerous Nevadans?
One of the reasons that I'm running, I run a foster care agency. There have been quite a few laws passed in that set of business that the language is all open for interpretation by the Department of Family Services. It's unfortunate because when I look at it from a business owner of many years, I understand business. And when they ask you to do certain things that they're not, and I'm not saying this in a negative way, they're about children. They're not about LLCs, they don't know really anything about that specifically. And I find that a huge problem. And I know if it's a problem for me dealing with kids, and I would imagine it would be a problem with anybody. We're not lawyers. I think things should be as simple as possible. One of the reasons why I'm running is because I think that our voice needs to be echoed. To have an open door policy, to have somebody who's, I'm not saying I'm an average Joe, but I'm an average Joe. And I need to be able to relay these concerns to the other 41 other people who are going to be voting on things. You know, not necessarily I'm an expert in any one field, but what I can tell you is the last 15 years of my community service life, if you wanted to call me right now, if you go on my website, there's my actual cell phone number on my website. Very transparent. All because I want people to get exactly what they're asking for. They're looking for people to represent them. And representation to me is a big piece of accountability. And being accountable means you have a obligation to take those phone calls. My address is published. I'm not hiding. I'm putting it all on the line because I want people to know that there is at least one person that's willing to listen.
Well, you basically answered my question. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
John's already
No,
answered.
you asked him, you're not actually telling me first of all.
You
Well,
deal, you
I-
deal with the kids. So do you deal with social workers,
Absolutely.
family social workers?
Absolutely.
Do you believe that if a social worker without family or having any kids, are they qualified to be a social worker?
You could ask me that question. I think, once again, myself, I use myself as an example. When I go to the state legislation, and I'm a legislator, I don't think that every legislator needs to be like Max. I think you need people who are a lot smarter than me. I think you need maybe a CPA, a couple CPAs, a couple of lawyers, a couple people from the money, a couple people that has sat on some that has gaming experience. I mean, just you need people with diverse backgrounds. Social work. There are a lot of people in social work that have great degrees. Not even social workers, people that do trainings, that people that actually train foster parents. So when I experienced, I'm a foster parent myself, and when I went to be the first day of training, the trainer said something that I was so disheartened. I was like, it's impossible for you to have any children, or for you to even have it fostered in your time with Department of Family Services. And she told us that we weren't supposed to love the children. So apparently, I don't even know if she had any of her own kids with a statement such as that. So when you talk about people who are social workers that don't have any experience actually dealing with the children and understand behavior, I think that's an absolute issue. They should do respite. They should do something so they can gain that experience. Because like again, when we were talking about education, I'm telling you a big problem with education is behavior. And it has nothing to do with education, but unless you fix that problem, it's going to continue. You're going to have a continuous problem of kids receiving a quality education. And I'm not saying that in the education sector, that needs to be funded more to fix that. No, there's very specific funding for mental health, and it needs to work together.
Thank you.
Anyway, just following through with what John said regarding a particular industry. I mean, my understanding is that you have, with your open door policy, you'll be available anytime and you'll be able to work with the industry that I'm representing regarding our concerns, regarding our ideas on how to improve services for our most vulnerable citizens. Okay, all right.
Yes, because I think it's, once again, when you see legislation, and I can only, since I'm not in the industry, you said most
Similar,
vulnerable. Elderly children,
Mhm.
the most vulnerable. So when you see legislation passed that does not increase the quality of care for children, I think it's useless legislation. So if I think that about children, I for sure think that about the elders.
Right now, a more specific, I'm not going through with my normal spiel, but going through more specific. One issue that we are having problems with is the fire marshal issue. The reclassification of group homes, instead of being a residential or R4, he reclassified us as an I group or institution.
Right.
Okay, so right now we're I2, but eventually he wants us to become an I4, which basically saying that residential group homes will become non-existent in the near future. Okay, and because of that, it's not just a business impact to the community, but more so on our most vulnerable citizens, given the fact that a lot of citizens will be retiring, okay, and we know that they really don't have any money, so
Right.
they cannot afford those fancy assisted living 150 beds kind of thing, nor if they have higher acuity type of care, go to a nursing facility, which would cost normally around $250 to $500 from the state budget. And we are the only alternative housing in care that can provide what they need. Okay. So the fire marshal right now is trying to pass a BDR, bill draft request, in his favor, because from our understanding, and it's still circumstantial, there's really nothing concrete about it right now, he's favoring more of the corporate type setup instead of a residential type. Instead of having 6-10 beds in residence, he wants to have like a big facility, 100-150 beds setting.
Sure.
And rest assured, it's not going to offer the same personalized type of service that a group home can offer.
Right. And I totally understand. And like I said before, a residential group home offers a quality of care.
Mhm.
And I only look to see things passed if that quality of care isn't met. So if quality care is met, I don't see the reason to change anything. And especially because when you start talking about changes, there's usually a thing called money that comes along with it.
Yes.
And it never is in the benefit of the care provider.
As
Never.
hard pressed as we are right now financially,
Right.
we could not afford
Right.
further.
And I'm not going on record saying I think people are trying to squeeze people out or
Mhm.
there's anything like that going on. But but in the actuality of things is what I kind of live in, and I think we live in the actuality of things.
Hopefully
Is once again in the foster care
Mhm.
industry as a person such as yourself, where I am responsible for foster care, for foster homes. It's the same thing. When you compile new law,
Mhm.
there's always money that is associated with it. If you say I need this person to qualify for this, and they got to have this and this. Now I went with a person and we've never had one write-up, we've never had any to go, and now I have to hire a person that's overqualified. That does not give us a better quality of care. So for your for your industry, yes, I would not support any legislation that wasn't in favor of
Most
providing
vulnerable
a higher quality of care for your patients. Period.
And hopefully you could carry the message that in group homes, we treat our residents as human beings and a member of our family rather than business.
Well, that's why I think people choose group homes. It's a choice, right?
Yes.
Families get to
We need to
choose.
give
You do a
those
residential setting, you use
choice.
an affordable assisted living setting. Those are choices. And I'm not into limiting choices for people via legislation.
So you're on record as saying you're pro-choice.
I'm sorry.
You're on record as being pro-choice?
Is that a
Somewhat of a sarcastic remark, kind of a joke, since you're a Republican. And that's not even an issue which you would ever deal with.
right? And I wish people really understood that from a state level, that people do not we don't vote for anything. I think the only thing that pro-choice or pro-life that we can actually vote on is if we're paying for it or not. Meaning that if the Affordable Care Act says that we're to allow abortions to be paid for by the companies of people that work for them, so then then I would have a stance. And no, I don't think that we should be forced to pay for abortions.
Well, on that note, we appreciate you coming down here, Max.
Thank you guys very much for your time.